Let's continue with our presentation of the new version of RadCORE. Let's now talk about the features that RadCORE offers for the UniGui. Well, those who already know that UniBGrid, which accompanies UniGui natively, is one of the most important resources that UniGui brings, as it offers a series of methods, means, data visualization, advanced resources that we find in components like DevExpress. Customized in what sense? Typically, when we present data in a grid, we want to format that data. We want to hide some column. We want to change the display color if the value is greater than 0, less than 0, something in that context. And what does this typically involve? Codification.
Ficação.
Once again, that purpose where RadCORE tries to bring benefits so that you code less, work less, and develop faster. Let's take a look at the grid, which is one of the most complete examples that RadCORE displays so that we can get an idea of all the resources that we can use within the display of this grid. Well, the first thing I'm going to draw your attention to is our navigation bar at the bottom. For those who know NGI, you know that the DBGrid navigation bar does not have this layout. I'm going to open another CRUD, and by default, it will work with the normal navigation bar. So in the state register, you will see the standard UniGui navigation bar below. So look, such a difference to the navigation bar offered by RadCORE. So you can have a more pleasant and fully operational look from this bar. And in more detail, the default NGI refresh, if you have a grid with several pages, it will not refresh by reopening your table. Okay? It's just a screen refresh. RadCORE's navigation bar refresh is integral to your table. Continuing this explanation of our grid, let's see what visual items we have formatted in our grid. You can see that I have the customer ID field here. It is centered in relation to the grid column, while the others are conventionally aligned to the left, which is the default.
Ok?
You will notice that in addition to the column title, its content is also centered. In the name of client, you will see that I have some names that are in red.
Ok?
We will later find out why they are in red. In the CMPJ column, which is a tax document here in Brazil, it already appears to me formatted and aligned to the right. Why? Because this column will contain both the company tax document, which is the CMPJ, and the individual tax document, which is the CPF. So I'm going to have two variants, okay? They may have two variants. And then, as they have different sizes so as not to be misaligned, I preferred to leave the alignment to the right. Just like the telephone number, which is aligned to the right, the zip code is centered, and with OK formatting, the address is standard, the number is aligned to the right, and the value is correct. Contract is also following the same color pattern as the customer's name. Because we are going to demonstrate a specific attribute of these two columns. Let's imagine what you would have to do at the code level to format the display of customer table data in this way. The most natural, most common way is to have your query. This query of yours will give you add fields in Delphi, so you can add the fields. You will click on each of these fields and adjust the name, alignment, and add an event to that field to be able to trigger and format its display. This is the natural, usual way of formatting data in the grid.
Vamos,
Let's see what coding hardcore has to display the data as you are seeing.
vamos,
Let's open our customer registry, and I'll open my grid here. So firstly here on my grid, what will I have as an event here with him? I have some events that are inherited from my default crew. The hardcore standard crew is the subject of our next video.
ok?
So at the code level within my customer record, if I access each event, I will have nothing, because everything I need to process is within my generation crew. The only coding I will have is precisely the call of our function that will do all the formatting of our grid. So just this line of code is what covers the rendering of our grid, as you can see with all these details. Now, how does hardcore do all this?
Vamos lá.
Let's go. As we have already seen, hardcore works with a dynamic attribute system. So I'm going to talk to you basically just about these items here that we're seeing from our client grid and what hardcore is doing to render. So let's go. In my ID column, which is up here, in my code column, I'm saying that it's title, the title of my code field. I want to run arse translate. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is that this column here will display content in Portuguese and in English. It will display other content. Just so we can take a quick look and remember how RC Translate works, I'm going to make an edit here, okay? And I will access our customer record here.
Ok?
So I will have here, when accessing the customer record in my form list, I will have my grid call caption here, and then I have my db.sush.crute, which is the name of my grid here. The code column is here in Portuguese, saying that it will be client ID, and my name field will be client name.
Ok?
If I change my language here to American and US, you will see that I programmed RC Translate so that client ID and client name are displayed. And you can do this with any of the languages.
Tá certo?
You will be able to configure how you want to display, including the title of the columns in your grid using RC Translate.
Leite.
So just to remind us a little about how our RC Translate works. Let's return here to see the other attributes that I'm using within our grid. Title align C, that is, I want the title alignment, that is my title align, to be centered for my code column, which is what you're observing here. Just as I want the alignment of the content itself, the align attribute will also be centered, which is what you're seeing here. And I want the width of my column in standard desktop size to be 135 pixels. But if I'm opening my application on a mobile device, I want it to be just 90 pixels. In other words, I can even configure the type of responsiveness for the columns in my grid through RadCORE's dynamic attributes. So guys, everything you're seeing here is simply done this way. I don't need to create any conditionals, and I don't need to use the fields editor. This here is our query, okay? And I don't have any fields added to my fields editor. I don't need to use the fields editor. Obviously, if you want, you can make use of this DELPHI feature. But hardcode tries to make everything as simple as possible, and everything is centralized in one corner, which is what we are seeing with these attributes that are being seen. In my name field, I'm putting, in addition to the translation that we saw already, I'm creating the CLS attribute here. The CLS attribute is a CSS class.
Tá?
It's just a conditional CSS class.
Adicional, gente.
In other words, instead of adding this to my fields editor, using onGetText, for example, putting if in there to compare whether the content of the field is this or that. Imagine how many lines of code I will be saving just by doing this. So I'm saying here that my name column will receive a CSS class if the value of the contract is the field that is inside my grid view here. I have my contract value here.
Tá, ó. Então,
So I'm going to have, if my contract value is less than 130, I want you to apply a CSS class where I'm going to be applying my bold font and putting a red color. If it is not less than 130, it turns black in bucket.
tá? Essa
I applied this same CSS below in the contract value field.
só
But since I'm already here in the field itself, I don't even need to repeat this field below.
basta.
Just put the conditional itself.
Então, gente,
So you see here that the SS class was applied transparently without a single line of code.
ok?
You will notice the other fields here that I'm using my visible false attribute in mobile. What am I trying to say? That if I'm accessing my screen from a mobile device, I don't want to display this column, this column, this column. Okay?
Por quê?
Why? Because it doesn't make sense on mobile for me to display all the columns. And we know that on the web, we have to try to maximize performance and minimize the display of content. Right? So here in the sep field, I'm applying a sep mask.
Tá, ó.
In the contract value, I am applying the floating point value mask and still placing the currency symbol.
Tá?
So we close these details about the attributes here. But let's see what our mobile grid looks like in practice. So let's run it, refresh the application here, and let's see what our grid looks like from a mobile device. Only the customer ID and customer name column. All display attributes referring to mobile visible, visible false on mobile were applied. Okay? Well, these resources, guys, they will bring a lot of productivity and a huge code reduction in your applications. But, as we said, you will be free to use them or not. It's just more features and benefits that RadCORE offers. Until the next video.